Ed Oldham, this is so much fun. I am learning so much from you about all of the music that you've loved over 2018. That was Bambino. Tell us about Bambino.
He is a gentleman from Niger in West Africa. He's of Tuareg descent or heritage, so similar to the bands Tinariwen and Tamicrest, the ones from Mali. So the Tuareg people are like a desert dwellers, I suppose, who transcend the boundaries, the borders of a lot of countries in that West African area. And so he's from Niger rather than Mali, like a lot of the other bands. Spent time in exile growing up because of strife in his own country, became introduced to the likes of Jimi Hendrix and Mark Knopfler as guitar influences, and he took those influences with his West African roots, his Tuareg roots, and has just come up with this own incredible sound and style of his. He's been quite well thought of in the West for a while. Dan Auerbach from the Black Keys produced an album of his earlier on in the 2010s. Your man from Dirty Projectors did the last one before this, I think Azel, which is pretty good, and the most recent one, which came out this year, Duran, which I have the vinyl copy of here.
That is a stunning vinyl cover there. That is beautiful.
So that track is the first one that we've just listened to. It's called Image Gan, I think it is. You'd probably pronounce it, and that actually does translate as the Tuareg people. So I think it's a very personal album, this one. He's gone back to Africa to record it. He recorded it in Morocco. And just, absolutely love his playing, and West Africa is just such a rich source of music. It's absolutely incredible.
And it does seem to be getting a lot of exposure. It does seem to, over that, like say, sort of like last 3 to 5 years, you hear more and more of it, which is great. So it's obviously sort of reaching the rest of the world.
Yeah, well, it sort of goes in cycles, because you have people that obviously go and dig for this stuff. Crate diggers do go, and there are labels like Analogue Africa, for example, is a German label where the guy physically goes to Africa, digs through piles of old records, and cassettes are a really good source of music in Africa as well, because that was one medium which did stick around and remained popular because it was cheap and they were easily transferable. The vinyl that they go through when they go to Africa is often in a very, very poor state. But this music is getting found. William Onyebor was a classic from a couple of years ago of this sort of thing. You know, the West suddenly becoming completely, entranced by an African artist. And so Analogue Africa does the same sort of thing and goes and finds this incredible music from all sorts of places and all sorts of decades, and there's so much to enjoy in there, because a lot of it's been influenced by the West as well, so there's been a lot of cross-pollination back and forth with this sort of stuff, so it's absolutely fascinating.
It is fascinating, and I think you do learn a certain amount of sort of background on the artists and the music that you like from blogs, don't you? You read a lot of blog sites, and that is a really good isn't it, if you want to sort of expand your musical repertoire. There's some great blogs out there.
Yeah, I think in particular ones that don't really bother with one particular type of music. They don't say we are an indie blog, or we are a metal blog, or we are a hip-hop and R&B blog, or something like that. So ones like, I suppose better known ones are things like Pitchfork, which for me can be a bit snarky at times, but there's still decent stuff on there as well. But two real favourites of mine are Aquarium Drunkard, I think, is absolutely fantastic, which is an American one. Los Angeles based, I think, and you've got everything on there from, Neil Young through to dub, reggae, to minimalist jazz, to all sorts of interesting stuff on that one. The Quietus is a British one, which is
excellent blog, yeah.
Very, very good. That's got some really interesting underground things coming through on
some
that
lovely
as
folk
well.
stuff on that as well. Some really good
very
folk
much
musicians,
so. Yeah. They've got their own thing going on where they talk about this movement called New Weird Britain, which is all got sort of based in things like folk horror and stuff like that, which is all quite interesting as well. Yeah.
So good stuff. And before that, we heard one of my choices for this past year, one that you'll have heard quite a lot if you listen to Sunday Soundtrack, Tom Misch featuring De La Soul and a tune called It Runs Through Me, which I really enjoy. We've had an email in from our Howard, who of course presents Jumping In, which had the special on Friday. So he messaged in. He's absolutely wrong, and I know he is from the top of this, because he says, I don't expect Sons of Kemet made it to Ed's list.
It made it on the Spotify one. We're not going to play them today, but it did make it on my Spotify list.
Yeah, so he mentions Your Queen is a Reptile.
Yeah, very good album. I have to admit, I'm very much a jazz neophyte. I know virtually nothing about jazz music, but certain things I hear and I like, and Sons of Kemet was certainly one this year.
Yeah, excellent. And he does say that the Jumping In Records of 2018, which was on last Friday and I heard some of and was absolutely wonderful. You can go back and listen to that for another week on the Manx Radio site, and some really interesting sort of, as he mentions, the sort of flavours of jazz and rock and world music influence and fusion. Well worth listening back to that. I have to say there was some excellent music on that. And then he also mentions vinyl, which we're going to come to now, because Howard says, I still play and enjoy vinyl. I spent a small windfall on upgrading and renovating my 40-year-old Lynn Sondek a year or two back. And he says he's got an old friend over at the moment, and one of the items on his son's list for Christmas, and his son is in second year at Leeds Uni, I love this, on his list was John Coltrane's Giant Steps on vinyl. That is someone at university, so a young person, and I'm finding this more and more, that young people are not only into a huge variety of music, and as much as sometimes I berate the internet, I think also we have to thank it for that, because it opens up a whole world to you, but at the same time they're loving vinyl, which is great.
Yeah.